Today, as we turn to Ephesians chapter 5, our verse for the day is chapter 5, verse 21. And this is a verse that sets up or illuminates everything that follows in the rest of chapter 5, all the way through chapter 6, verse 9. And these verses are about how we relate to one another in a Christian household. And Paul writes specifically about husbands and wives, about fathers and children, even about slaves and masters. And the verse that heads it all says this: be subject to one another out of reverence for Christ. And why it's so important to keep that verse in mind is because of how people have looked at the verses that follow, some of the ways it gets interpreted. Because it talks about wives, be subject to your husbands as you are to the Lord. But it also tells husbands, love your wives as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her in order to make her holy. And so everything that follows in Ephesians 5:22 to 6:9, I do not think it's wise to read it as saying there's a dominance of a husband over a wife. I wouldn't read it as a justification for slavery. Well, see, Paul didn't say that slavery was wrong, therefore enslaving people is okay. What he says is, in all of our relationships in our household, it begins with us being subject to one another out of reverence for Christ. It means we put other people first. So if you're a husband and father, you put your wife and your children's needs ahead of your own. If you are a wife, you do the same for your husband and for your children. Wherever you are, whatever your household looks like, it's about treating people with reverence and respect, just as we would treat Christ. And that's what is called for, and that's what makes for a peaceful, loving, contented household. If every single person in the household is trying to be humble and to look to the good of others, just as we would if that other person was Christ, you're going to have a happy and a strong family. So be subject to one another, not because the other person is who they are as a human being, but you do it out of reverence for Christ. And when we all seek to do that in a household, Christ will reign.